State Park. You folks are now currently aboard one of our world-famous glass-bottom boat tours. Now, my name is Captain Bridger, and I'm going to be your captaining guide for the next 30 minutes or so. And before we get too far away from the dock, I am required to tell you all that I am licensed and certified by the U.S. Coast Guard to be your captain today. So with that, there are a few safety spiels that we got to go over first. First and foremost, I do have a radio here beside me that is in contact with the 4 other boats that are here today and the dock back here behind us. And if for some reason any of you folks were to become ill or impaired, then just let me know and I'll have EMTs on the dock within about 15 minutes for you. Now, if for some reason I were to become ill or impaired and I'm not able to finish the trip, well then just grab this radio right here. Just push and hold the button to the left-hand side, and then give them the international distress signal. Just let them know that you are aboard the Chief Charlie Cypress today. Tell them Captain Bridger is down and out for the count, and help will be with you folks shortly. And then if you want to drive the boats, just divvy that up amongst yourselves, please. But also, folks, we do have life jackets conveniently located right above your heads there. Adult jackets are in the middle, and the child jackets are to the front and back of the boat. Now, don't worry though, folks, in over 100 years, we have never needed to use a life jacket, so we should be just fine for today. But if for some reason something were to happen, I'll just ask you to bring them down from the top, place them over your head, secure them around your waist, and then make your way out into the water. And then from there, folks, an alligator rescue team will be here shortly to save you all. And it will only cost you an arm and a leg for the service. Now, one final thing before we start looking at some springs today, folks. These 3 panes of glass that you're looking through right now are just ½ an inch thick, and these are not magnified at all. In fact, these right here are just regular old pieces of glass from 1966. But now, folks, with all of that being said, this first spring that we're looking at today is called the Spring of Stars. Now, as I'm sure some of you folks probably already know, many movies and TV shows have been filmed here at Silver Springs all throughout the years. And the very first one was filmed back in 1916, and that was a silent black and white film called The Seven Swans. And since 1916, world-renowned actors and actresses like Jane Russell, Burt Reynolds, Jerry Lewis, Lloyd Bridges, Tom Cruise, Johnny Weissmuller, Steve Irwin, and many, many more have all done movies and TV shows right here at Silver Springs. And in some cases at this very spring that we're at right now. And at this spring's deepest point here, this is going to reach about 25 feet deep here. Now, while we're on the topic of movies though, folks, by a quick show of hands, how many on board has seen the classic horror movie The Creature from the Black Lagoon? Wow, a handful, that's cool. Well, this spring we're going into, yeah, you'd be surprised, like not a lot of people have seen it. But this next spring we're looking at here, folks, is the Creature Spring. And this is going to be called the Creature Spring because this is the site of where we get our very first appearance of that creature underneath the water in the iconic film. Now, Creature from the Black Lagoon was released back in 1954, starring Richard Carlson and Julie Adams. And to this day, it is still considered a horror movie classic of all time. And all underwater shots of that movie were filmed right here at Silver Springs.
There is a turtle. Did you see a turtle?
Now, the depth of this spring is going to reach anywhere between 30 and 32 feet deep. And for anybody on board who has not seen Creature from the Black Lagoon, the Walmart right across the street from the park normally has it on DVD for about $5. Now these smaller fish that you see under the glass down here are different kinds of brim, primarily bluegill. And all these fish that we see down here are just taking the glass ceiling tour today. Now, this next spring that we are approaching, folks, is going to be called the Abyss. Now, years ago, we had some divers out here to measure just how deep this next spring goes. So, they grabbed their scuba diving gear, and they went down below into the abyss. Now, as these divers got deeper, they learned real quick that this became a lot tighter as they went down. And well, it got so tight that they had to take off their air tanks and push them in front of them to wedge themselves deeper into this spring. Right. Well, these brave souls ended up getting deeper and deeper. And eventually they were stopped by this spring at about 81 feet down below. Crazy. But while they were down there, they noticed that there was still just a little bit of wiggle room left over below them. So they grabbed some weighted line and they dropped over a 1/4 mile of rope deeper into this spring, and it never hit the bottom. So, we really have no idea how deep this spring actually is. But for the record books, this is listed as at least a 1/4 mile straight down. But to give you all an idea on how deep we think that spring is, one day we did find a sign floating from below back here. And that sign, oddly enough, was written in Chinese. Pretty deep hole, huh? But this next spring we will enter, folks, is the Florida snowstorm. Now this area down here is going to be one of the only places in Florida where it snows. And this right here, folks, will be one of 2 places in the entire world where it can snow flowing up.
You can see it. I didn't fool anybody with that, did I? All right, fine. No, what I'm actually talking about here, folks, are just bits of rocks, shells, and limestone all being pushed out, by the force of the spring, giving the general appearance of snow. Now, you folks are going to hear me mention limestone a few times throughout our trip today. And that's because the Florida aquifer, where all of these springs are coming from, is pretty much made entirely of limestone. Now, if you don't know what the Florida aquifer is, kind of think of an underground lake and river system that spreads throughout nearly the entire state of Florida, and it even creeps into Georgia and beyond. And there are certain points in the aquifer where all the force from the water will erode away at the limestone, eventually cracking onto the surface of the earth, creating these spring heads like the ones we're looking at down here. And all of that in turn is going to help create the lakes and rivers like the Silver River that we're currently on as we speak. Now, folks, before we continue any farther downriver, I do want to introduce you all to one of my very good friends out here on the river today. Hanging out over on the right-hand side at the base of that tree over there, we're going to be able to see my very good friend, George. And George, folks, is going to be about an 8 to 9 foot long alligator coming up at first over here on the left-hand side.
Oh.
Now, if at first you don't have the best look at the gator, don't worry, I will spin the boat, make sure everyone can get a good look at this guy here. But again, folks, this over here is about an 8 to 9 foot long alligator. Now, you folks can always get a pretty decent guesstimation on how big alligators are if you measure from their eyes to their nostrils in inches. Then that's about how big they'll probably be in feet. And we do go out and measure with our rulers every morning. Now, what this gator is doing right now, and he picked a great day to do it, is just hang out here and collect sunlight along his back. Now, alligators' backs are going to act a lot like solar panels. That's how they get a lot of their nutrients throughout the day. And this is going to help them out in such a way where they don't have to physically eat that often. In fact, these gators right here have the ability to go eating just a couple times a month if need be. But when these gators do physically eat, their diets will mainly consist of fish of any size. If the gator is big enough, they will go after some bigger animals like birds and turtles, and then also some land animals like raccoons, possums, snakes, sometimes wild cats that we may have in the area, like a bobcat or something. Much larger gators we've seen sometimes eat animals like deer and cows. And in rare occurrences, you will even find alligators eating other alligators. And that second alligator you thought you saw was me pushing a log, but I didn't know it was there. Now, usually though, folks, right around the end of November, all of these gators in the area will start to shy away from their regular eating habit, only to put just a little bit more focus into eating Florida State Seminoles. It's the natural way of things. Was everyone able to see my buddy over here?
Yeah. No.
Who said no?
Yes, I did. I missed the video though.
As we cruise away here, some of you folks may have also seen these blackbirds up here in the tree branches. These are both anhingas and cormorants. And these are some of our swimming birds that we have here in the area. And these birds over here are excellent swimmers and even better fishermen. But these birds right here lack a natural oil in their body to repel water. So when these guys swim around, that water soaks into their body like a sponge. So there comes a point where they're a little too heavy to hold themselves underneath the water. And then when that happens, you can see them hanging out on tree branches like this anhinga here to the right of us. And this one's not doing it right now, but normally you can find them spreading their wings out to dry off manually. Come on, man, let me see your cue. That's coming out of his paycheck.
water, how blue it is. How blue it is. The water. You see it?
And this next area we'll pull into is the Spring of Life.
I saw it.
And in just a moment, coming right underneath the glass, we're going to be able to find a very interesting piece of wood down here along the bottom of the river. Now we're going to start to see two pretty big items down here, but we're going to focus on the much skinnier thing that's down there for right now. But this piece of wood right here has garnered so much attention that the University of Florida from up in Gainesville wanted to come down and look at this thing for us. But they wanted a closer look at it, so they ended up taking this thing out of the water and they brought it up to Gainesville to do their research on it. And they concluded that this piece of wood was an old Native American dugout canoe. This down here is believed to be used by some of the Timucuan Native Americans that were in this area hundreds of years ago. And in fact, they found out through their carbon dating that this dugout canoe is over 600 years old. And that makes it the oldest dugout canoe found in Florida. Now, the university was wanting to put this into the Florida Museum of Natural History, but the state park was wanting them to come bring it right back here where they found it, since it is considered state property. So, UF really had no choice but to agree to do so, and they were able to come bring it back within just a few inches of where they once found it. And that is to help preserve how it was naturally here at one point. So this dugout canoe will be sitting right where it's at for as long as it can. And luckily for that canoe, it is able to sit there for clearly quite a while, because that is made out of cypress wood. And as long as that cypress wood was taken from the trunk of the cypress tree, there's a natural chemical in that wood to help prevent rot, and essentially help keep that thing perfectly preserved under the water. And if you missed that first gator, folks, over to the right of us here, there is a second gator hanging out over here in the grass. This is my friend Bucky. Bucky's about 6 feet long. Now, the alligators out here are pretty territorial animals. If they find a decent spot and they kind of make it their own, we can normally pick out which gator is which depending on where they're hanging out. I know it sounds a little strange to hear, especially if you're not necessarily used to alligators, but in my opinion, these guys up here are relatively docile animals. They don't really do a whole lot. What we're looking at right here is what this gator is going and has been doing for most of the day today. Now, it's of course when other animals or people do something too close to these gators to where they feel threatened. Or if they get too close to the nests, the food, the babies, that is when these alligators will go in defense, and then they will act accordingly. I'll put it that way. Now, when an American alligator does decide to act accordingly, they have the third strongest bite in the entire animal kingdom. And that is right behind the Nile crocodile and the saltwater crocodile. So, any way you slice it, those prehistoric lizards are certainly nothing to mess with. Well, that, folks, will bring us to the Blue Grotto. Now, here throughout the Silver River, folks, we have over 32 different species of fish out here. And this is all including, but not limited to, 3 different kinds of bass, 2 different types of gar. We have catfish, and armored catfish, and several different types of brim. And around here we also have mullet,
bowfin, mudfish, shad, river trout, and we even have tilapia in this river. And the tilapia is an invasive species originally from Asia. Now, we're not 100% sure though on how the tilapia got here to Central Florida, but if you ask me, I'm thinking that they probably took a shortcut through the abyss.
That's what I was thinking.
And as we slowly make our way forward over to the right here, there is another one of these anhingas, and this one is performing that drying of the wings process. I mean, this bird could be drying off his wings, of course. Or he could be lying about the size of fish that he caught earlier.
Be cool if it was just some manic fish.
That's good.
Just goes to show we're going to bring our kayaks in some of them down to Florida.
Now, as we are making the turn to head back upriver here, folks, if you start to look over towards the right-hand side, through the trees out there, we're going to start to see a very large white building out there into the distance. I know it might be a little tricky to see out there, but that is going to be a huge estate with beautiful colonial-style architecture sitting on a massive piece of property out there. And that, folks, is my brand new house. Perks of the job. That out there, folks, is just going to be the Twin Oaks Mansion. But what the Twin Oaks Mansion really is a stage. Because that out there is our old concert venue here at Silver Springs. Now, the Twin Oaks Mansion was built back in 1993 in hopes of bringing in some world-famous acts to perform here at the park. And it has certainly done its job. Because we've had the likes of Willie Nelson play here a few times. Charlie Daniels has played here a couple times as well. Loretta Lynn and the Sunshine Band. The Temptations, The Beach Foreigner, America, Loverboy, Molly Hatchet, Cheap Trick, Styx, Johnny Cash, Metallica, tribute band. So essentially, you name it, and at some point they've probably played here in Silver Springs. Now, these days, unfortunately, though, the mansion out there is not primarily being used as a concert venue. Main reason being, it is pretty tough to make money from a concert when you can only charge $2 per ticket. But if we have any potential newlyweds on board, or anyone looking to maybe renew some vows, the Twin Oaks Mansion out there can be booked out as a wedding venue these days, too. And yes, folks, you got it. With just enough people, you can average that out to about $2 per person. Now, just a moment here, folks, we are going to be rounding the seawall here to the right. And as we do so, if you look at about our 2 o'clock through the palm trees out here, we will start to see a large statue of Osceola of the Seminole Native American tribe. Now, the story behind the statue up here depicts of when Osceola refused to sign a treaty with the U.S. government.
Now, you see, at this point, during the early 1800s, the U.S. was pushing a lot of natives away from this area. And their treaty, quote, quote, basically said that as long as the Seminoles do not put up a fight, the Americans will let them leave the area with their lives. So, Osceola did not take too kindly to that message, so he took their treaty and placed it on top of a table, took out his very large knife, and he drove it right through, saying that he would not sign and that the Seminoles would not be leaving anytime soon. Now, those actions are, of course, what sparked a war between the U.S. and the Seminoles, and all of those actions took place right here within this general area of Ocala. And even though a lot of the Seminoles did end up getting pushed kind of all throughout the country, a good number of them fought, and they remain here in Florida still to this day. So, they never left, and more importantly, they never signed. So these Seminoles, folks, are truly unconquered. Except when it comes to football. Alrighty, folks. We are now approaching the main event of our tour today. Now, coming under the glass in just a moment, we will find Mammoth Spring. Now, Mammoth Spring is going to be the head spring of the Silver River. And the spring itself is going to be a cave that's about 5 feet tall and around 65 feet wide. So because of the spring's large size, you folks on my left are going to get the best look at the spring first, but I will spin the bow to make sure that everyone can get a good look at the spring down here. Now, this one spring by itself is responsible for pushing out over 550 million gallons of water every single day. And that insane number is what makes this spring the largest artesian spring made out of limestone in the entire world. Now, the water that comes out of the Florida aquifer will maintain a constant temperature of 72 degrees year-round. And right out of the spring, this water is already 99.8% pure fresh water. Now, this water will form the Silver River, which is going to flow for about 5.5 miles. And then this will flow into the Ocklawaha River. And then once it's in the Ocklawaha, it snakes its way across the state going east, and after a very long while, this eventually hits the St. Johns River out of Palatka. And then the St. Johns is going to take all of this water due north, through Jacksonville, and then eventually out into the Atlantic Ocean. And at this spring's deepest point, just over to the right of us here, this is going to reach a total of about 40 feet deep. But as we are starting to cross Mammoth Spring, folks, there is still just one final thing I got to show y'all before we head back. Now, right around 1967, there was a TV show by the name of I Spy, starring Robert Culp and Bill Cosby. And about midway through the 3rd season, there was an episode of the show that required an underwater scene with some underwater statues. And these statues are what we are going to be cruising on top of right about now. Now, the three statues we'll see down here, folks, are the Greek gods, Zeus, Poseidon, and Hades. Right now, these are going to sit in almost 30 feet of water. They will each stand roughly 7 feet tall, and these are made almost entirely out of a mythical substance called fiberglass. Now, originally for I Spy, there were 12 of these statues in total, and then when filming was done, they were going to bring all 12 out of the water. But some of the local people here in Silver Springs put up such a stink that they compromised and only took out 9. So they left 3 beneath us here for our viewing pleasure. How nice. But it worked out because after I Spy, you can see these 3 in the James Bond movie Moonraker with Roger Moore. And then aside from Moonraker and I Spy, these statues down here and the area all around us can be seen in tons of other different movies, TV shows, and commercials all throughout the years. So for the last now 55 years, these 3 statues have grown to be some of our resident movie stars. Move over, John Travolta. Now, was everyone able to see the statues?
Yes.
Cool. Did everyone get the pictures that they wanted? Perfect. Well, then, folks, with all of that being said, that is going to conclude our Glass Bottom boat tour today.